So there's one, and then after I take roll, I'll pass.
Yeah, that's how they were doing it to me earlier. I just didn't press it hard.
Tested it. Yeah, I got it figured. There's I'm just gonna leave it here because I'm not gonna play with it until this thing's over with. It just worked fine.
Yes, we still have 2 minutes though, right? Okay. And you're gonna...
I will do your red relay. Yeah.
Putting it back up. I had.
Good evening and welcome to the regular school board meeting for Independent School District 833. It is Thursday, January 3rd, 2019 at 6:30 p.m. and we are at the District Service Center in Cottage Grove, Minnesota. 1.0 is roll call.
Pat Driscoll. Present. Heather Hirsch.
Present.
Michelle Whitty.
Here.
Katie Schwartz.
Here.
Sharon Van Leer.
Here.
Ron Kath.
Here.
Tracy Brunnette.
Here. 2.0, please stand and join me for Pledge of Allegiance. Is the approval of our agenda tonight, and we will have one additional action item, 10.5, which is a proposed settlement agreement. And with that addition, a motion to approve.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Sharon and second by Heather. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. 4.0 is election of officers.
I would like to make a motion to approve the following slate of officers. For chair, Tracy Brunnette. For vice chair, Ron Kath. For treasurer, Katie Schwartz. And for clerk, Sharon Van Leer.
Second.
Michelle and second by Ron. And we still have to ask some more, right? If there are any other nominations? And any other nominations? So is that 3? One more? All right. So we have the slate as presented, and all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. 5.0 are our organizational items for 2019, and we'll accept all these in one motion as well. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Sharon and second by Katie. Any questions or comments on any of these? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. 6.0 are our consent items. All consent items are considered routine and non-controversial by the school board and will be approved by a single motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items. Prior to the meeting, board members had the opportunity to review them and could have requested that one be moved to an action item for individual consideration. We have had not had that happen for this evening, so I'll entertain a motion to accept our consent items. It's moved by Pat and second by Sharon. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. 7.0 are workshop items. 7.1 is a conversation with our local legislators, and Superintendent Keith Jacobus will introduce.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I know you'll be joined by a couple of your colleagues, but I want to let you know we appreciate so much that you take the time to spend a little time with us talking about what you think about the session. We're going to ask you a little bit about what your priorities will be and maybe hopes and as we get started. And I want you to know we know how busy it is and how when you're invited, everyone is asking you for a number of things. And so we appreciate you listening, but we'd also like to invite you that anyone around the table, anytime we can help during the session, you can call our cell phones and we'll try to answer directly and give you any information to help you. Because I've seen the volume of reading you have to do, and no human can do it and still vote on everything. So if we can help you at all, please let us know. Because we have some new legislators, we hope to do just a quick summary of the district, and so I'll go through that a little quicker with you as we take a look at this. But as you know, or just a reminder, we're the 6th largest school district in the state, and we're actually at now about 18,500 kids, and you know, with all of our growth, we anticipate a slow but steady growth over the next, depending on the build out, 10 to 25 to 30 years. So we cover about 84 square miles, and Cottage Grove and Woodbury are our largest cities that we serve, but we serve Newport, St. Paul Park, Denmark, and Grey Cloud Islands. Then as far as services we offer, we're very pleased and proud of what we offer to kids and to families. We have a robust early childhood and family education program. We have 16 elementary schools and that are K-5, 4 middle schools that are 6 through 8, 3 what you consider traditional high schools that are 9 through 12, and 1 alternative high school that is 9 through 12 as well. And our adult education programs, along with our choice programs, our Spanish immersion, international baccalaureate, and our gifted programs as well. So our strategic plan quickly just has 2 objectives, and they both weave together to try to create an environment for kids to thrive and succeed. The first one is the definition is there to engage and motivate kids, but the basic idea of personalization is to know kids well enough to provide them whatever they need when they need it. And through an equity lens on, for the same reasons, providing students what they need when they need it. And getting to know kids so as they come into school, we can tell the subtle differences when things might not be going well, just like a parent could. And I say, I talk to our parents a lot, that what we really want is every staff member in the district to treat all of our kids as if they were their own personal children. And as we personalize for them, it's not about getting into their personal lives in a way that we shouldn't be, but knowing them well enough to know how to provide the right interventions and assessments that they can reach their ultimate potential. Then the second one is culture and climate for both our students and our staff, creating that positive culture and climate where people feel welcomed and they see themselves in the system. Part of what, as you read about, and adults, if you don't feel like you're connected, it just isn't a place where you can thrive. And so our focus is on creating that positive culture and climate in a number of ways for staff and students. Our diversity, we're about 33%. We have about 33% of our kids come from what's considered a diverse background based on the categories, demographic categories that we report. You can see the breakdown here. We're about 67% white, and these are the terminology used by MDE, about 11% Asian, 8% Black and African American, and 8% Hispanic. And then we have now the category of 2 or more races. And our diversity continues to increase, which adds a great dimension of kids coming in with a lot of interesting experiences. And we learn as much from our kids and their backgrounds as we hope to impart knowledge on them. And so we're really pleased with the makeup of our kids and the continued demographic growth of our district. As far as graduation, you know, the state has created goals of graduating a certain percent, 90%, and we've been ahead of that before they even came out with those graduation rates. This is the 4-year rate. Last year was 92.4%. And as you know, we then will work with kids for a 5th year and 6th year to help them receive a high school diploma, or with our adult diploma center, they can work with us until they're 150 to receive that diploma. We think that's really important. That's a free service. That's another service I'm really proud that we're able to offer for our community. The Minnesota State average, as you see, is 82.7. Everyone's working very hard, and graduation rates are going up throughout the state and as well in our system. We had 11 National Merit finalists last year and 8 commended students, which is a very prestigious honor, and 3 merit winners. We had 25 kids graduate with a bilingual diploma through our Spanish immersion program that culminates at Woodbury High School. And we had 9 students that graduated with an IB diploma at Park. And if you've looked at the IB requirements, it is so rigorous that it's really difficult for kids to, if they're in athletics or activities, to maintain the IB diploma. So sometimes people look at that and think, 9 kids? That's a tremendous success because all of the kids are involved in IB. It's just that the ones that continue for the 4 years, it's quite an achievement. And then 6 kids last year had perfect ACT scores. Recent highlights, last year Bailey Elementary was selected and identified as a National Blue Ribbon School. We're very proud of Bailey, and Andy Graham, our principal, is here tonight to do a little bit of talking and bragging about the school, and we're excited about that presentation later. We had 14 schools that were identified by MDE for their different categories for recognition because of their achievement. And Cottage Grove Middle School, I'm taking a look at this and saying, I cannot see this. And I can't see this at my age. So I'm saying, oh, Cottage Grove Middle School is our, thank you so much. Here's the older person's version. Whew, that's helpful. But Cottage Grove Middle was recognized as an emerging school of character. They've been working on their character ed piece, and they were recognized for their work. The Chamber of Commerce of Cottage Grove recognized Linnea Gamache as our Educator of the Year. She's a reading specialist at Cottage Grove Elementary. Those accolades are just wonderful for our staff. And then Rich Romano, the principal at Newport Elementary, was recognized as the Woodbury Chamber Educator of the Year. So new for this year, and I think you were at and you've been through the building, but we opened up our new Oltman Middle School, which we're very proud of, and it's been a wonderful addition to our schools in the system. We expanded Woodbury Middle School, and we also had completed expansions at Lake and Cottage Grove Middle School as well. Our Spanish immersion program now is at the middle school is at Woodbury Middle School, so they feed into Woodbury High School. And we finished the phase 1 construction for Nuevas Fronteras to move into the original Oltman Middle School. So we're excited about that, and excited about that school, and that's been a great addition as well. So quickly, again, how our funds, and you know this, but the funding for the district, 76% comes from the state, 20% from local levies, only 2% for federal, and I think that's important for our public to understand too. We don't receive as much money from the federal funding sources as people might expect, and then 2% for local revenue. What we're proud of is where we spend our money. You've probably seen this in our levy presentations and budget. But as you take a look at that, we spend 86% of our dollars, or 80. Sorry, I'm taking a look at that. If you take a look, 50. Sorry. Again, here's another. There my notes are. 86% in the classroom, which I started to say, only 3% on administration. And so our money goes to the kids and in the schools, which is, again, we're proud of. You've seen this graph many times about the lag of inflation in funding, and so that is, you'll hear a little bit more about that in our priorities and what that means to our school district. And then our growing dependence on referendum revenue. I think this is really interesting data for the public that in 1992-93, only 65% of the schools had any type of levy referendum. But now as the funding is shifted, the levies have not only become, they're not an add-on at all, they're really a cornerstone of our funding. And so now 100% of Minnesota districts. And that becomes difficult because we are out constantly with levies. And you know that as well, because we've talked to you about that in the past. So what we'd want to, before we get into our legislative platform, we thought we'd give you an opportunity to introduce yourselves. And then if you're representing, and I know that many of you represent different school districts than ours, who you represent, and what your priorities might be, or what you hope to focus on during this legislative session.
Gonna make sure the green light is on.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me here tonight, or having us here tonight. I'm Tony Juergens, State Representative for District 54B, and that district includes about half of Cottage Grove, all of Hastings, Nininger Township in the Dakota County side, and Denmark Township and Afton on this side of the river. Other school districts that I represent are District 200 in Hastings, and some of the Afton kids go to the 834 in the Stillwater School District. I am on the Education Finance Committee. I was on that committee in my current term that's coming to an end, and I'm glad that I was reappointed to be on the Education Finance Committee again in the upcoming session. This is going to be a budget year, so our priorities are all having to do with budgets, whether that's the education budget or taxes or whatever it is. So that's where the majority of our time is going to be spent. As far as my priorities, I don't have any one single area that I focus on. I try to, if somebody brings a good idea to me, I try to work through with that idea. So I'm looking forward to hearing your priorities tonight. My guess is they're going to be pretty similar to what Senator Kent and I heard in Stillwater a couple of weeks ago, and probably very similar to what we heard in prior years here as well. But I think it's a good opportunity for us to meet with you, to hear those priorities. And Dr. Jacobus, I know I've said this before, but I know you mean it when you say if we have questions to reach out to you, because I know that there were times when I'd be sitting in the office at night and reading up on bills, and I'd have a question and call you or text you, and you're always available. And I appreciate that. That helps because, you know, when we hear one side of an argument or an idea, it might make perfect sense, but unless we talk to someone who's going to possibly give us another side of that, you know, sometimes we need that so that we can hear both sides and find out that maybe there are some unintended consequences. So I appreciate your availability always, and I'll turn this over to Senator Kent. Thank you.
Flashing green, yay. I also want to thank you all for welcoming us here this evening to talk about this upcoming session and District 833 and what's going on in our community. I'm Susan Kent, State Senator for Senate District 53. So I represent the city of Woodbury, Landfall, parts of Oakdale, and Maplewood. And in terms of school districts, that is obviously South Washington County plus Stillwater area schools and 622 North St. Paul, Maplewood, Oakdale. And as Representative Juergens said, you know, we hear a lot of similar themes within these districts, which is a good thing. When we're hearing consistent voices asking for a lot of the same priorities, it makes it easier for us to make the case with our colleagues and get good things passed at the legislature. I am on so there have been some changes in the Senate since we were last together, and they merged the Education, Finance, and Policy committees. And so I'm pleased to still be on it because it shrunk overall in numbers. So I will be on that committee again and looking forward to serving and continuing to fight for these issues now for 6 sessions. And, you know, listening to the priorities as we've discussed them so far and the concerns that you've raised, yep, absolutely. These are issues that we know well, and we've been working on them, but we need to continue working on them because it's what's best for our kids, it's what's best for our taxpayers, and it's what's best for our state in the long run.
Thank you. I'm State Senator Carla Bigham. I know you've all heard this, but I have to say it because we're here in front of school board members. I have a PhD, a Park High diploma. I'm a proud product of South Washington County Schools. I also had, my mother worked here for 32 and a half years. I can't say 33. And my brother currently works here. He also said something about mentioning vans for maintenance, not trucks. I don't know. Anyway, so very excited to be here. I came in February. I was a previous Washington County Commissioner. So it's been a few years since I've been here because before that I was in the House. So I have the South St. Paul School District, South Washington County, Hastings, and Stillwater throughout the district. I'm not on the education committee, but education has always been a priority to me, whether I was in the House, the Senate, or just a member of the community. A few things that are going to be my priorities, definitely levy equalization. That is a huge deal for our area, for the suburbs. I had a bipartisan bill last year that we're going to bring up again for school threat assessment teams, and I'm happy to discuss that in more detail, but I don't want to take up everyone's time. I am going to reintroduce the deadline for contract negotiations, and I also am introducing a bill that asks you guys to report on how much you're required to spend on testing, because I don't believe we should just be teaching to test. We should be teaching curriculum and producing world-class, students, and I just think you guys are required to do a lot of testing that is unnecessary. So I think that'll be helpful to show what you guys are required to do that may not always be as beneficial to students. And lastly, I don't know if you saw the news last week, and it's not an unfunded mandate because I don't do unfunded mandates. Radon testing is a big concern of mine. Only 30 school districts in the whole state test for it. And so we're going to put that into the maintenance plan for the 10-year maintenance plan, and you can use money for that. So those are some of the items that I'm going to be prioritizing on. Also, whatever you guys have here too. So thank you.
as you pass the mic, I'm proud to say we're one of those districts that tests.
I heard that from a family member.
Excellent.
Thanks. And I really need the mic tonight. I lost my voice. So I will also keep my comments short. I am Ann Claflin. I am on the west side of Carla Bigham's district. So it's the west side of Cottage Grove, St. Paul Park, Newport, Great Cloud Island, and about a third of South St. Paul. And that's where I live. I am a brand new freshman and not even officially a representative yet, but very, very soon. I'm looking forward to it. Education policy is not something that I'm an expert in at all. I am a scientist, and education is very important to me, but because of my science background, I'm used to going to other experts, and I want to hear from you what you need for your school district. You know better than I'm going to know, and I really want to have a relationship where we can work together. Please let me know how we can help the school district and what's going to be best for students. Thank you.
Thanks. Before you, as I introduced and before you had arrived, I said that we're always available. You can have all our cell phone. If we can help you as you go through, because there's a volume of things that you have to be prepared for, you can call us at any time. We'll try to answer questions and give you any information that you need. So thank you for being here. So we want to talk about our priorities, and we've looked at it in three different areas. One is the increase of local control to provide our Board of Education and other boards in the state that control of what would be best for the system. Many, many times what is best for the full state doesn't work well in each individual district. So you'll see that we've divided into areas of local control. The second is the equalized funding and enhance the equity, and it has to do, we'll talk a little bit about that levy equalization because that certainly affects our system and is something that I know that has come up again and again. We've made some strides there, but we have a little bit more work to do. And then support strategies to help close our opportunity gaps. And I know in listening to all of you and talking to you that is a priority for the state. We've highlighted that for a number of years of where as successful as we've been with our kids in education, there are those opportunity gaps that we have not made the strides that we want to stride or that we want to make. So you'll see as we take a look at these. Our workshop agenda, the board voted to suspend Robert's Rules of Order to make it a much more informal conversation. So I've asked cabinet members to start the discussion each one, and I've asked people to jump in as they go, and for you also to stop us, ask questions, and provide any type of thoughts that you have as we go through. So I want to make sure that that it's more interactive. So the first is starting under that increased local control. I asked Shelley to talk a little bit about our first priority statement. So.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair Brunnette, school board members, and area legislators. We appreciate you being here tonight. Our first legislative priority, as Keith had mentioned, has to do with local control, and it would allow locally elected school boards to renew existing operating referendums at least once every voter-approved authority. This priority has been put forward before, and it has overwhelming support from school districts and voters throughout the state. According to Morris Leatherman surveys over the last 7 years, the majority of voters do support that. Communities overwhelmingly support renewing referendums. Over the last 5 years, renewals of school district referendums have had a 100% success rate. So AMSD has cited that in the last 5 years, 82 renewals have been put forward and all overwhelmingly passed. And was approved. Allowing the school board to renew an existing operating levy even one time would save a tremendous amount of time and resources. For example, during our last referendum in 2017, we spent approximately $6,200 just in printing for educational materials about the referendum, and we organized over 100 community meetings to talk about the importance of renewing the referendum. That was an incredible amount of time and resources on behalf of the district. And oftentimes, districts are required to put forward a election when it's not a typical election time for renewing a referendum, when for putting forward a referendum when there is a need. And then in those cases, the school district is required to incur the total cost of the election, which would be about $35,000 for our school district, which was in 2017. As you heard earlier, just about all districts across the state have had to rely on referendums much more as part of our general operating budget. Our budget from these local referendums now equal about 20% of our total budget. So therefore, the failure to pass a renewal would really be devastating financially for our district, as the money has been embedded into our district for at least 10 years. At one point, when referendums were passed, they were passed for 99 years. And at some point, that evolved and changed to the 10 years. So tonight, we'd like to ask for legislation that would allow our local school boards the ability to vote to renew these operating referendums at least once without needing to go through another election when the voters have already approved the support of it in the past. This change would incur no additional cost to the state and save time and resources for our district and many across the state. We know that other government entities, like cities, have the ability to improve or approve an increase in additional funding when the need presents itself, and we would like to ask for a little more flexibility for our locally elected school board to do the same. Thank you.
May I make a comment to this? When Representative Juergens and I were with Stillwater, one of the concerns that came up from the group about this was that somehow it requires a school district to renew these without going to voter approval. And just to clarify for anyone who's paying attention, that would not be the case. If a district felt like they needed to go to the voters to do that renewal, they would have the option to do that. But it just makes that option available. And this is something I've supported. You know, it is a big expense. And as Shelley said, this has been approved on a regular basis. So I'm hoping maybe this will be the year we can make this happen.
Well, I think, too, it'll help the citizens understand, because when they get their tax statements, you know, that the preliminary ones, you know, it's pulling it out. And we just had our tax and truth session here just last month, and we had a gentleman show up and he said, am I going to get a surprise again? And that's because the tax statement doesn't have the renewal. We passed the renewal, and then the next year it came on their tax statement. So it gets to be misleading even for the public to know what their true tax impact is. So if we had that flexibility, that takes that miscommunication out of the equation too.
Great. The other aspect, as you know, with us, we've had 3 levies in 3 years, plus we've had past levies, and so it's a cycle of I feel it puts us in a situation with our public of working on and eroding trust level, because when you go back, even though it's been in place, folks are questioning, well, can't you finance yourself, or can't you manage your funds well enough to not keep asking us? And with a 10-year levy, it is not easy to separate that levy dollars and keep it completely separated, so if it fails or it goes away in 10 years, it's no big deal. It becomes intertwined in that budget. And I think all of those things have been raised throughout the state. So we're hoping that this gains a little traction this year and could move forward. So the second area under the increased local control, I asked Mike Johnson to start us out.
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you for attending tonight. Our second priority regarding local control would be allowing us the...
Sorry, we should, for those of you that are new, Shelley is our communication director, and Mike is one of our assistant superintendents.
Thank you. Would be to allow our district the flexibility to use lease levy funding to add needed common spaces to accommodate growth. For example, restrooms, cafeterias. Another space would be secure entries in the future. First, right now we're allowed the authority to add classrooms to our schools through lease levy funding as additional needs for our students in space are identified. Secondly, however, with the additional students, and we have many pockets within our district of growth, there comes more of a strain on our common spaces like the restrooms, cafeterias, and so on. A number of our schools, for example, start lunch just after 10 o'clock, so it's almost like a brunch, to try to get everybody through. At our 1960s prototype elementary schools, there's one group of restrooms for the entire school. It's a big challenge for elementary students to get all of our students through before lunches, et cetera. We went to the voters with a referendum question on this back in 2015. Unfortunately, it didn't pass, and the need is still there for the students. And we'd like the flexibility to be able to make those structural adjustments to our schools when we see the need to do so. We do appreciate it. I believe last year, one or two of you may have sought assistance on our behalf, and we had gotten some clarification. But I can bring up Eastridge as an example, where it's over its functional capacity. It has been for a couple years, and although in the future could we build? Yes, we could, but we can't make another cafeteria. We'd like to be able to use that funding as an example. And just like with the 1960s prototype elementary schools, Pine Hill, for example, with all the construction that's going on over there, it'd be great to be able to add onto that restroom or construction. So thank you so much for your efforts and your time.
If I can just react to this one as well. You're right, this is something that we have tried to work on. This is something I know that this was in a working group, facilities working group several years ago that was a recommendation. And I know A33 has been pushing for this for several years. This, just like 60s buildings no longer suit the education world of today, this language doesn't suit the need to grow our schools today. So again, this is another one that's just flexibility for districts to take care of our facilities and our students.
Do you know what the issues have been against it? I mean, there's no money on this one. It's really, so I'm trying to figure out what the obstacles are. It's just.
This is one that I mean, I like with the first one with the renewals, I get that there can be an issue about, are we raising taxes and making it too easy to raise taxes? I don't agree with that, but I know some people make that argument. This one, I agree with you. I don't understand what the resistance is, but we'll keep pushing.
That piece for the public too about not an increase. There isn't money needed for the state for this, and we have a cap, as you know, of lease levy. We can't go over, so we could continue to utilize that for classroom space, and so it's just a shifting in that. But it may sound to folks that it's going to be a large increase, but since the state caps us and we're not asking to change that cap, just that flexibility, I think that cap is important. We try to look over the years to make sure that our tax burden stays fairly consistent for our voters, and as we did this year and past years, refinance bonds to drop that down as we go through. So, great. All right, then looking at enhanced funding and equity, our first one, Dan, lead us through, talk a little bit about the funding formula and the things that you've all been familiar with as we get into each budget cycle. So,
sure, thank you and good evening. I'm Dan Pyan, I'm the Director of Finance and Operations for the school district, and the first two were free, the next couple cost money, unfortunately. So remember the free ones. We know that, I mean, the most important number to the bean counters in the school districts is the number of kids we have, because we multiply that by the formula. The basic formula that is set by the state legislature has fallen behind inflation over the last 15 years by quite a bit. It actually adds up to about $600 per pupil. Obviously, if that would have kept pace, we probably have less operating referendums and all that kind of stuff. So what we're asking for, and most of our lobbyists, our education, the MASA and MSBA, MASBO, and AMSD, and then districts, is that we could look at a 3% increase per year on the formula that will start getting us back to the place where we wish we could be. If inflation would have been considered over those years, and then I know it's not always possible, but that's about $618 per pupil. That's about $12 million in our district. Probably would have replaced some referendums or could have enhanced some things. So that's really the basic ask, is 3% a year on the formula, because I know you're going to start working on real numbers at some point. And then if the big ask is if it could be indexed to inflation. And then there would be no struggles on what the number is going to be, and we could plan. And inflation is not always that high either. It's, you know, we have to be careful what we wish for, because sometimes inflation will be below 2%, sometimes it'll be higher than 2%. But at least we could pretty much plan based on that. And that's kind of what the big ask is. And the other side of funding is really looking at doing something with special education. It's a growing cross-subsidy of statewide. It runs to about $530 million. In our district, it's about $17 million. The difference between what we pay, that we get in state and special education funding, and what we spend on special education. So that money comes from the general fund. We're glad to provide the services, obviously. We welcome all learners. It's just that the federal government has not kept their promises, and we need the state to help out any way they can. So those are the two big asks on the formula, and special education funding. It's really just, it's a money thing. We understand that, but we're just looking for some way to plan better too.
Dan, can I ask a question on the special education cross-subsidy? About what percentage of the district budget is going to that cross-subsidy?
It's about, well, it's 17 million divided by 239 million, so. Well, her phone says 0, so I don't.
Total is.
No, it's
Sorry to put you on the spot.
7%.
Okay.
That's the cross-subsidy. We spend about 40 million on special ed.
The reason I ask is I know some districts have been seeing some dramatic increases, and so I just wanted to, it seems like we're still tracking, but it is increasing, so, okay.
Well, and one thing that's happened with the formula too, and I know Department of Education is working with the business officers, and we're trying to come up with some kind of solution, but the new special education formula has caps, but the caps are influenced by tuition payments and other factors, and there's open enrollment transportation, and it's just kind of a mess right now, and more districts are budgeting up against the cap. So it doesn't really matter. Now, whatever we spend, there's no reimbursement at all. So those are all things we hope people are looking at. And I know there's probably going to be some, hopefully there was, one education policy committee that was started working on that issue. I went to a few of the committee meetings, but we're hoping that you guys can do something with that too.
I think there's a newfound energy in Washington, D.C. with, I think, the changeover in who's in charge, especially in the House. I know that I heard Congresswoman, I can say Congresswoman now, I get to drop the elect, Craig, has a child with special needs that she's really going to focus in on this. And I know that there's a lot of members of the new class that have similar relationships. And so I think that if there's ever a time that this may get straightened out, this is where I have a lot of hope on it. Because I think they realize how it impacts your property taxes, but how it impacts your all's ability to budget and the ability to plan for growth and all of those details that you have to be responsible for reporting. And so I think that there's a lot of hope in Washington, D.C. that they're going to focus in on this issue.
I think that'll be really helpful, but as we noted, we only get 2% from the federal government, and it's not all special ed. So if we have a 7% cross subsidy, even if the full 2% from the federal government takes care of it, we still have 5% from the state. And you asked, Senator Camp, last year you said, well, I think it was last year, you asked me, well, what would be a specific cross subsidy you could look at? Well, one of the things, as Dan mentioned, is the transportation. We're responsible for kids open enrolled. We spend a lot of money sending buses all over the area, and that's one thing that we could look at a cross subsidy. It's a small amount of the cross subsidy, but there's a number of other things like that with our early, our pre-K kids who come in from other districts. And once they come in, they're open enrolled automatically with us, and then we have some transportation needs. So there's some things we could talk about more in depth for you as you take a look at the cross subsidy in general, but anything that we could look at to reduce that. And I appreciate the work and the potential work at the federal government too. I don't want to belittle that, but I think there's a two responsibility, the state and the federal side.
Well, and I'm glad you referenced that because I'm pleased to see that AMSD has sort of structured their request for the cross subsidy in a pretty concrete, tangible way. And I think that just helps us really identify, as opposed to we got this big mountain, let's do what we can. That's too nebulous, I think, for legislators in the process. And so to have something concrete is meaningful. And the other thing I want to say, and Dan, I'm glad that you've been attending, that was the Education Policy Committee that had some of these informational hearings looking at this issue. Some concrete suggestions were brought forward by the New Ulm School District. And the one thing I would say to you and to any of the special ed leaders within our district is to pay attention to that, because, you know, the one thing I want to make sure, one thing we all know in education policy and finance is that it's really hard to make one size fit all in a state as varied as Minnesota is. And so I just want to make sure that whatever is coming down the pike is not going to create problems, and that we first do no harm as we try to solve this particular issue.
And that's what makes this difficult, because everything we do for our kids is really, we think it's really important, so you can't say we don't want to do this. And the transportation is important as well. It's just that helping in the funding. So we'll continue to look for those specifics as we go. I think this will be an important topic that'll come up. So anything else on?
Dr. Jacobus, and was that on? Getting back again to the meeting that Senator Kent and I were at in Stillwater a couple of weeks ago, and obviously this topic came up as well. And we've talked about the cross subsidy, and that, as I said that day too, is kind of the elephant in the room. If the federal government was living up to their responsibility, we wouldn't even be having this conversation, and we probably wouldn't even be talking about a 2% or a 3% increase, because right now you're forced to take the money out of your general fund to pay for the cross subsidy, to pay for special education. So I hope that Senator Bigham is correct in that maybe we can start seeing some inroads from the federal government to alleviate that pressure on school districts like 833.
Yep, I think that both level approach will be wonderful, because you're right. I mean, we all know it hasn't been funded since IDEA came into existence, and there's a lot of great things that we do for kids, and the needs of our kids change on a yearly basis, but also the trend data, as probably districts have talked to you about, the needs and the severity of needs that kids come into school, and then that percentage of severity continues to increase. So, and we're excited about helping those kids and helping our kids, and all of our kids succeed. So. The next aspect on the enhanced equity and funding is on that the referendum equalization. And so for the public, and just review, districts that have a higher commercial property in their district, when they ask for referendum dollars, there's less of a burden on each individual household, and actually spread out between the businesses as well. We happen to be a district that is high in residential property and low in commercial property. So as we raise $100, that same $100 is much more expensive to our taxpayers and our homeowners than other districts, which make it hard. And as we said, since levies are so intricate into school funding, a district, just because of their commercial property and other aspects, may not be able to pass a levy, which makes it unfair throughout the state for our kids in education. And so I know there were some strides on that equity formula, but it didn't go far enough. So that's an important aspect for us as we continue to look for the future. And if you had happened to see the presentation by the City of Woodbury and Cottage Grove, the growth that we have is spectacular with 12,000 homes, but it's all homes. And there are some commercial, but it's very slow, and we don't have much commercial property that's being developed in the long run. So this is the equity piece that would be important.
You know, I think you and I spoke about this before too. Is that a couple years ago, the state added money for the agriculture, kind of equalized that for farmers. They were getting unfairly punished for the referendums and bonding. And the other two legs didn't get fixed. And so I know that that's what you're alluding to. But it's just also a reminder that the agriculture fix was not permanent. And so that's going to have to be addressed too soon, or it's going to fall right back to what it was at sunsets. So that's something that we have to find a permanent funding for, along with what you're mentioning too.
Right, yeah. Great. So then moving forward, I think as we look then strategies to close the opportunity gap, there's two things that we're interested in taking a look at, and Kelly Jansen, our Director of Teaching and Learning, is going to talk to you about the first one.
All right, good evening. Our English Learner Program falls under our Teaching and Learning Services because we look at all of our kids as all of our kids, and it's important that we service each and every kid and provide that individualized learning experience. It's also really important for this group of students that we're able to have the resources and the staff to communicate with families and bring them into the educational system and make them part of our community. We serve approximately 1,000 EL students in 833, and over the past 4 years, we've seen our EL population increase by about 200 students. And to give you a sense, to continue the trend of financial conversation, in 2017-18, our district spent approximately $3.3 million on our EL services, and between federal and state funding, we received $690,000. So that was a cross-subsidy of about $2.6 million. So as you can tell, it's a huge gap between what we need to provide for service and the funding that we're receiving from the state and the federal government. This funding also does not account for the level of service, and to not get into it too technically, but students can be identified at EL at varying levels, and they come in as even newcomer to country and almost proficient, and they're still identified as EL. So those services look very different across the board. That newcomer may need an hour a day of direct service, whereas that proficient needs 15 minutes of check-in every week. So the funding formula doesn't account for any variation in level of service at all either. So we're asking as you convene your Education Finance Committee, you have these conversations, and this is a really important group of students. They've been identified even in the SL legislation as the access scores and are in closing that gap with students and reaching language proficiency. So if we really want to close this opportunity gap, this is a group we can't forget about. So thanks for your consideration.
And a number of our kids would be identified as gifted, but as we try to navigate and servicing their needs when if they come in completely not able to speak, we miss those kids. And so because of the language barrier, they may be looked at differently academically. But I would also say this also fits with our culture and climate goal for the district, because if you think about a little second grader coming in from another country, how frightening it is to go to a new school to begin with, and then to come to a school and not know the language. I feel our EL services provides that connection for a student right away with that provider that helps them transition into a school and creates that ability for them to feel comfortable and to take the risks they need to push their language skills, but also feel good coming to school and not being frightened and shutting down. And so this is kind of a hidden cross-subsidy cost. We have put that in, kind of lumped that in with full cross-subsidy of services, but that $2.6 million will continue to grow throughout the state too. And the majority it's something that we'll face in the metro area along with throughout the state. So, all right. And then we have another free one, so to speak, which is good. We're not asking for funds here, but we're asking for things that I think is helpful for kids. And Brian Booth, our Director of Assessment and Professional Development, is going to talk about this.
Good evening. Yeah, I have kind of a small request. So I'm not asking for millions of dollars here, but this is, I think, something that Senator-elect Bigham just referenced in your opening statement, that a way in which our district and districts across the state can more accurately measure career and college readiness and reduce the burden of over-testing. So while this might seem like a small request in comparison to some of the big ticket items that are mentioned earlier, sometimes those small ones can pay off a big win for a school district. So basically this belongs in policy and kind of is for the policy wonk, and Senator Kent, we've chatted about this one before as well. And I'll start by saying we have a wealth of knowledge in this district. So if you're ever in the conversation about testing, we have principals in this system who have years and years and years of experience who are more than willing to talk to you about the burdens of testing and the joys of testing and what we learn from it. And we're certainly available. And then also in our district, we have an assessment coordinator who is the senior most assessment coordinator in the state. So if you ever have a question about state testing, come to the South Washington County Schools. We'll have the answer and the history behind it. Basically what we're asking for is some flexibility that was provided through ESSA. With the passage of ESSA, states were given the flexibility to create their accountability systems. And we've been using in the state the MCAs. The MCAs is our main assessment tool for school accountability. But within ESSA, there is a clause, the ability to use other assessments to measure schools. And we're asking for, at the high school level, to shift away from using the MCAs and shift toward moving the ACT. I've made this request in previous sessions, and we hope that it gets an opportunity to move forward this year. We've heard through some committee work and some of the discussions that this is something that Governor-elect Walz is interested in supporting as well. There's some committee work that's going to be looking at this, and so at the end of the day, what it does for us is it will reduce the burden of testing the MCAs at the high school level. We already are required to give the ACT or a nationally recognized college readiness exam on a school day. So here in South Washington County School District, we give the ACT to all of our 11th grade students. We send our 9th, 10th, and 12th grade students home for a day, and our 11th grade students get an opportunity to take that test. And I'll say it this way here. I don't want to sound like as if I'm begging, but I'll give you this plea. I was my graduating class when I graduated from high school was the first to pass the basic standards test in order to graduate. I don't remember my score on my basic standards test. I remember my ACT score. I don't want to share it because I guarantee you all of you have a higher score than I did. But I'm guessing by the laughter in the room, many of you remember your ACT or your SAT scores. The ACT is not just a measure of college readiness. It is a measure of career readiness, so this isn't a way for us to try to say that we're better than others. It is a way for us to truly understand if our students, as they're walking out of the doors of the South Washington County School District, that they are ready for any career, a trade, they're ready for any 2-year college, 4-year college. It is a measure that our schools, our high schools, value much more than the MCAs. And so we ask for consideration on that flexibility as a state.
And essentially, we're doing that now. Our high school teachers focus on those ACT prep standards and getting ready, even though we look at the MCA. So it's something because our parents look at that ACT. It is helpful for kids who may not have been thinking about college. Giving it the ACT to all of our juniors helps stimulate some kids that may not have thought about school and college, and then post a score that with many colleges looking at super scoring or breaking it down and giving scholarship dollars. We're really in this system. We just need to formalize it if we could.
Brian, what would you, if you were to be able to use the ACTs instead of the MCA as an assessment for the high school level, tell me about what would you gain from that? I mean, obviously there's testing days, but going beyond that, a cost savings, is there time that would be better used instead of preparing for the MCA to be learning other subjects? Just talk about
all of the above. Instructional time is probably our biggest cost. We lose instructional time giving students the test itself. They take it in reading in 10th grade and 11th grade in math and once in science after they've taken biology. And so there's 3 different tests that the students have to get ready for throughout high school. That is a loss of instructional time. The staff time that it takes to prep and make sure that we're ready for those tests at the high school level is enormous when you're talking of a school of 2,000 kids and only one of those grade levels is taking a test. It becomes a burden on space. I would say as a state, there are state costs that you could save because right now we contract with a company to give the MCAs, and so certainly the state could afford to reduce that contract and take that money and then you know, if you were hopefully to reinvest that in spending on the ACT, that would be lovely, but it's not that's not even a part of our request. We don't mind providing that service to our students. The ACT costs us about $74,000 to give to our entire 11th grade class. We get reimbursed right now for students who are free and reduced price lunch. So that does not quite nearly cover the cost, but it's a cost that we are happy to pay because, as Dr. Jacobus mentioned, we have students who take the test who had no idea that they were going to be ready to go to college. And so the biggest cost savings to us as a school district would be just in instructional time. But there are some state level costs that you could see in reducing that contract with Pearson.
Sorry.
Sorry. And go ahead if you had more to add to that.
No, go ahead.
What about just being able to follow the results as a student goes through the system and then not having that MCA at the high school level? Would you be losing valuable information by eliminating that?
It's a great question, and one that I would say our high schools and we as a system, it's difficult for us to make a comparison to a 10th grade MCA to an 8th grade MCA. So it's not a loss of data that we would then go back and say, boy, we really are missing that key piece of information. In the 10th grade, we give a pre-ACT exam as well that we pay for. And so starting in the high school, the most important indicators that we use internally in terms of academic data other than grades would be the pre-ACT and the ACT. The MCA doesn't rank in that top two. And so I would say we wouldn't be losing valuable information. We would be gaining more focus on information that is more important for us. Yeah, and useful.
My mic seems really loud. So my comment was just going to be too about the complexities of explaining to families why we have these different tests at the high school level and what they can be used for students who are looking at their opportunities outside of high school, where the ACT seems a lot easier to explain to a family and to a student about why you're taking this and what that's going to help you and what it might tell you, and then what it might tell you want to work on if you have, as you're thinking about your plans, whereas the MCA, from my understanding of it, I don't have a high schooler yet, but it doesn't give that same conversation with a family and a counselor, a family and a student around what they plan to do after high school. And so I think the argument to keep it just because, oh, well, we have it then at 2, 3, 5, 8, and 10, or because it tells the state something, I don't think is reason enough to say that we should keep a test if it's not actually, if our schools aren't seeing benefit in using it. So.
The other thing I would say with the assessments on the ACT and the career and college readiness, even kids who are not going to a 4-year or 2-year college can benefit by doing very well on that. Because those kids need the most rigorous course, and everyone's going to have to go back for more education in today's world. But I think sometimes when people hear there's an emphasis on ACT, it's not meaningful for kids who may not go to a 2-year or 4-year, but it is very meaningful because of the content. So.
Real quick, I think the other nugget for people to talk about with this policy change is the amount of money it saves a family paying for the ACT test as well. And I hope the bulletin doesn't print this, but I had to take it multiple times. And so that adds up. And to get into a 4-year college, when you need a decent score to either qualify for scholarships, qualify for certain programs, at schools. So I think that's important. So I don't know, Superintendent Jacobus, I don't know when it was, but maybe it was June that you and I toured a bunch of the schools together. And one of the things that was brought up, because I had thought about this, the timing of when the MCAs are given. They're given in the spring. You don't get results until the fall. Is there something in state law, and I don't know if somebody that's been doing this longer than I have would know, that prohibits the flexibility of a local school district from changing the time? Because it would seem if you did it in the fall, then by the spring you would know the results, and then you can help them, in a path. So maybe this isn't anything to do with what you're bringing up, but
also the windows start really early, so we're losing almost a third of the year in education and being tested. But Brian has more explanation.
Yes, it is in policy of when the testing windows are available, and so our school district, our spring break is timed pretty nicely this year, but we'll start testing, I think, the 3rd week of March, which is still pretty early in that time frame. And so certainly if there were to be a shift in when, that would need to be a statutory change. And I guess I think Dr. Jacobus has some pretty strong opinions on it. It's hard. We get the results immediately. We don't share them with parents immediately because there's a process that needs to go through from the state to make sure that that data is accurate and has been vetted to in case there were any test abnormalities or anything like that. And so the parents get the full printed reports in the fall. But we as a school district have access to internal data immediately. Yes, individual student data that we can then start looking at and know. And certainly we have conversations with parents that if they come and ask and we have some conversations with them about what the scores were, we give that to them. And so it's not held secret. We just can't publicly report it. I can't come to the school board and share it until after the embargo is lifted. And so there is some cleanup that needs to be done when you're testing tens of thousands of students across the state at the same time. And so
When you look at our teachers work so hard and are vesting so much time, and kids are too, to do well, it would be nice to take the MCAs the last week of school. We go into June, the second week of June, but we may finish our testing window in March. And with all of the focus on those test scores and what that means for the whole school, it seems that's the timing, that issue that is frustrating for me. We certainly can look at that data.
So as the parent of a Woodbury High School senior, I have lived this experience over the past 13 years closely. And all of these are such important points about the experience for families, what it's like for students. We hear, in committee all the time that, students are really clear that the MCAs don't matter at that point, that what they really need to focus on are the ACTs. And so you got some real questions there in terms of what that does to the test results overall. I've been supportive of trying to do this for a while. You make really great points. And the other thing I would say here is to my colleagues up here, having sat down with Brian last year, he's right. If you have questions, definitely come to these guys. I came with a staff member from the Senate, and we really dove into a lot of good information. And I encourage everybody to do the same.
Appreciate that.
Well, as we finish up, there's a lot of information out on education. We just went through election cycle and education was spoken about. We'd like to give you a chance to, do you have any wonderings or questions or things you're thinking about with education? And then we're just curious on your thought on the surplus, not surplus, or what you think that may look like, but really more a chance to ask any questions that we could answer for you as well. And
related to the surplus, we're statutorily required to take 33% of it and put it in the budget reserves up to $2.5 billion, and we're getting close to that $2.5 billion mark. We're not quite there, so we will be taking a third of it and putting it over, but that might be one of the last times we have to do that, providing that we have surpluses going forward. There's a lot of one-time money in there, and as a fiscally pragmatic person, I don't believe in using one-time money for ongoing programs. So if you also have to take into consideration inflation. So it isn't nearly as large of surplus that people are when you see it. So I think we also have to be cautious. The economists are talking about an economic slowdown right now. The strong economy and having a positive budget balance is a very good thing for Minnesota. It is. But when the economy, between tariffs, the stock market, there's a lot of uncertainty that they're cautioning, maybe a possible economic turn down here. So I think we have the positive balance because of a strong economy, and Minnesota has continuously gone above and beyond what the national levels have been in other states and surrounding states. So we're good here and with the economy, but I think we have to urge caution on it. And that's just kind of how I'm going into this next 2-year budget planning.
Yeah.
I'm glad Senator Bigham brought up the point about the one-time funding, because everybody hears about the surplus and it's like, oh, yay. But a lot of that is one-time money, and we're still sort of sifting through. And so the conversation continues to be managing expectations. You know, I know there are groups out there who have $1 billion wish list, and to Senator Bingham's point, if it's recurring funding, as would be, you know, putting the money on the formula, for example, we need to make sure it's sustainable. So that's a big issue. Another thing that is going to continue to be a subject of conversation is the overall question about early learning. We had the Legislative Auditors report come out last year that raised a bunch of interesting questions about how the different buckets and the different types of programs we have, and there's federal aspects to that and different ages of students, but we're going to be spending some time sort of digesting that, and there was a big grant that was just sent to the state to sort of assess some of that. So that's just something I think we all need to keep on our radar. One thing I will mention under the spirit of local control, because I know this is a thing that has come up, I'm going to have a bill that at least for, I think it's 2020 and 2021, would give districts some flexibility for start date, because that's a really late Labor Day.
I refrain myself to
Those
talk
2
about
years, I know,
calendar.
If we can just do it for 2 years and maybe get some momentum. But the last thing I want to say that is it seems like a sharp turn, but it is relevant to everything we've talked about, so bear with me. And that has to do with transportation funding. There's been a lot of discussion, you know, through the past election cycle about how we're going to fund roads and bridges in our state. And in this past year, or last budget cycle, we pulled some money from sales tax to auto parts and put it into transportation, which meant that is money that came out of the general fund that is usually available for education and now has been diverted into transportation. Fine, we can have the discussion about whether that was the right thing to do or not, but we just need to understand that the more we keep diverting out of the general fund, that limits our ability to deal with the inflationary demands that are realities for education funding. So as we're having those conversations in the state legislature, keep in mind that the road and bridge funding is its own checkbook, and general fund is a separate one, and that's where education is. So when these things come up, they actually do affect each other. So everybody pay attention.
As for the budget surplus, since so much of it is one-time spending, and I can assure you, Representative-elect Claflin, that budget surplus is going to be spent 100 times over. People are going to be coming in saying, well, you have this surplus, so why can't you increase funding for this project or for that? It happens. And the truth is there's a lot of very good ideas and very good possibilities where that money could go. Education is one of them. Now, as far as what Senator Kent was saying, I do take exception to that. 42% of general fund spending is spent on K through 12 education. General fund spending for transportation is 0.7%, 0.7%. The money, the sales tax money that's diverted from auto parts sales would increase that to about 0.8 or 0.85%. So by definition, any money that's spent on anything other than education is kind of taking money away from education. Any money that's spent on the environment is potentially taking money away from education. Any money that's spent on health and human services is potentially taking money away from education. When you're looking at 42% of the general fund budget versus 0.7%, I think that diverting the sales tax from auto parts sales is a pretty good use of that money. It's not going to fully fund transportation, but it's really minuscule as far as, even at $250 million, the amount of money that's then being shifted, or it wouldn't even necessarily be shifted from education. It's just a different pot of money. So I do understand where she's coming from that. I obviously disagree, but we're still friendly to each other, right? Thank you.
Thank you. I don't have many thoughts about the budget itself right now, but I do have a question for you about the nutrition services. I absolutely believe that education is one of the most important jobs of government. Public education is maybe one of the few things that we have to do. And I wanted to ask more about the nutrition services because we know that our kids can't learn when they are hungry. Is there someone that can tell me more about what the school district does to support families within the schools and beyond the walls of the schools?
Can I start?
Sure.
Because I'm sort of a super fan of our nutrition services here in the district, who has really, to me, we are one of a model district of taking advantage of all the incentives offered by the federal government during the change in the standards. We often say, we say regulations when we talk about food, but we say standards when we say education, and I say it is standards. To your point that we've learned a lot about food, and we need to teach people how to eat and use food up to those standards, and our nutrition department has done an amazing job of fully participating. I think the last one, the sodium one, we're not quite there yet. That's been a harder one to get to. But what you'll find, and you should take a tour and meet with our staff because they're phenomenal. We hand make, just, you've never seen make a big vat of marinara. Like, our stuff is, beautifully handmade, fresh ingredients, all of, it's just for $1. I mean, what we can do, what they can do for $1.50, for $2 in our nutrition services. But also what they've done so well is to be able to survey ongoingly the students. And so they've done really great things. And I've been on the Youth Advisory Committee and watched the kids say, I hate beans. And as a scientist, which you are, which is great to say, do they really hate beans? Well, what they found out is they didn't like black beans because they look like bugs. And so they replaced them with pinto beans. And the kids are eating the beans. So they've done a great job of identifying the problem. Why do we have waste? Things like even their yogurts, instead of selling a whole or having a whole yogurt parfait, they get to add what they want in their yogurt, and they're more likely to eat their yogurt. So we've done, I think a really great job of also staying within budget, keeping a fund balance. Also, to a scientist, you'll love our charts, because what we found was when we had the change, when we went to the whole grains and really embodied a lot of the changes that came about, there was a huge drop in participation in both, a la carte and in the regular program. But the next year, and we changed out all of our vending machines. There's not a Coca-Cola. Well, there's Diet Coke, I think. Is there a Diet Coke? I don't even know if we have that. No Coke. All, good juices, waters, all that. But when that changed out, but within the next year, it went up, and now it's higher than ever. So the data shows very clearly that when given good choices for good food to eat, it's affordable, kids like it, and they eat the heck out of it. So there. I'm very proud of our district for this.
And then,
Oh yeah, that's what
In
I was
addition
gonna
to
do.
that,
So you're
I was
gonna
just
talk
going to
about
add, Bob Lawrence, I'm the Director of Community Education. So we are in a formal partnership right now with Second Harvest Heartland, and it's called the No Kid Hungry Initiative. And so the idea is that while the school nutrition service program offers a great healthy meal options during the school day, there are weekends, non-school days, breaks, and even after school. And so we're working to end child hunger in District 833. The data that was presented to the school board when we enter this partnership is that 1 in 5 kids in South Washington County schools is food insecure, which means they're missing 1 or more meals in a month. And so we're working hard on the out of school time as well in partnership with our food nutrition service program, and to meet that basic need of food. And beyond that, just additional basic needs. We work closely with Cheryl Jogger and the Sowashko Cares program, which is a program that specifically looks to identify student needs, like whether it's clothing or food or other resources, and find resources to meet those needs. So we're working really hard. We completely agree that if kids aren't here ready to learn, that's the number one barrier that they're going to focus on, is what they're missing. And so we're trying to meet those needs too.
That's a phenomenal program, by the way. Very excited about it, and I know Representative Jurgen's been very involved in it as well, and at a lot of the events too. So it was wonderful what you guys did all summer long at Newport, in my district in Newport, and at Park. I mean, it was amazing, and I just think it was a big benefit to the schools, or to the community.
I have attended a bunch of those meetings, or when I'm available, when I can do that, and it is a great program. And the thing that really opened my eyes is that most kids look forward to the weekend. Most kids look forward to summer break or Christmas break. But there's those kids that don't have food at home that actually dread those days. They know that when they're in school that they're going to have a good meal. But when they go home on the weekend, they don't know if they're going to have a meal there. So the program, the No Kid Hungry program, I think is doing great work. I applaud you for participating in that. I wish I could make it to more of their meetings. Like I said, I go when I can. But it really has opened my eyes to, we think about in the suburban areas like this that's not an issue here. Well, the fact is it is an issue here. 1 in 5 students. And so I encourage you to continue doing that, and I think that we'll see some great strides there. Albert, I know, has led these types of programs before, and so I'm looking forward to see where that goes.
Well, again, I can't thank you enough for spending time. I hope you get enough sleep and you can relax in the next few hours before the session gets going. The other aspect on partnerships, if anything that Health and Human Services people look at you for mental health, that helps us too. That's one of our major challenges as we go through. So again, if we can help you at all during the session, please call us. And we want to partner with you in any way we can to help our kids and to help you as the session gets started. So.
And I would ask you too, when you hear things in the community, because sometimes you're the point of community of people having issues with their schools, to call us before necessarily understanding what the issues are. It is a sobering reality that we have where, we've spent down to our, the bottom of our fund balance, and we sit at 48 to 48 administrative spending, and we've raised almost up to the cap. So we don't have, any more money to solve our problems in a big way. So we're going to have to get creative, working with partners such as yourselves. And so if you hear things out there, because I think we're going to probably have to look at some tough things as things go on here, and come to us first to get all the facts, and we'd love to keep that partnership going. Thank you.
I also want to echo, I'm thrilled that you're all here. I'm glad that you all asked questions. I appreciate Senator Kent and Senator Bigham talking about what your priorities are, and especially around education and the ones that align with ours. I think I'm assuming, I don't know, sometimes I just say things and I'm new and they let me and they go with it. But I would obviously welcome you to come back and be part of the conversations as we talk about these things with our families and with our students, and as we are struggling with some of these realities as well. I think hearing the feedback that I've heard as a board member now from dozens of our families, hundreds of our families, has certainly shifted my thinking around what is truly important for a school board to be tackling. And so I welcome you to come and be part of those conversations as well.
As a closing comment too, maybe something to consider, because we've talked a lot about budget, talked about dates and timing. And I can tell you one thing for point, that settling contracts is very hard when you don't settle your budget till June. And we're trying to put a budget together and settle contracts when we don't even know the amount of money that are coming into our district. So I think putting hard lines in sand of when contracts need to be done puts a tremendous amount of pressure on a school district that doesn't even know where their money and how much money they're going to have to spend. And that both on the labor union and also for us as a school district. So, if I had my wish list, I wish we could align the budgets all to be with cities and counties and be all done so that we're not off cycle. Because Dan comes to us all the time on the tax and truthsation saying, well, we've already approved our budget back in June, and now we got to talk about what's going to happen next year. So we're never aligned at that point. I caution that, it really puts a tremendous amount of pressure on us as a school district.
Thank you.
Well, we'll get you on your way. Thank you again for being here, and I hope you have a great start to the session.
Thank you all for coming.
Sure.
Good to use the herd.
All right, if we could come back, get back to work.
Have you ever done a church?
No, but I gotta take it up.
Yeah.
Every morning at 9 o'clock.
Oh my God.
They work their way back about 4 o'clock. It was every day. It was
All right, we're gonna get back to work. Por favor. All right, we are on to 7.2, and this is awesome because we're going to showcase some of our schools, Red Rock and Bailey Elementary Schools. And we have Jennifer Holt with us this evening, who is principal of Red Rock, and Candace Graham, who is principal of Bailey. Welcome.
All right. Is it on? We have two. Okay. Well, thank you, Chair Brunnette, Governing Board, Dr. Jacobus, members of Cabinet. It's great to be here. As introduced, my name is Jennifer Holt, and I'm the proud principal at Red Rock. It's been a great time here. It is my 4th year at Red Rock, and tonight I'm going to highlight some of the social and emotional initiatives that we have going on at our school. I was told we just had about 5 to 7 minutes, so I won't cover all the things that we're doing. Rather, I'm going to focus on just one piece that you'll find throughout our school culture here. To begin, just wanted to kind of land on some common language about social emotional learning, and the MDE defines that as a process through which people build build awareness and skills in managing emotions, setting goals, establishing relationships, and making responsible decisions that support their success in school and life. And at the elementary level, we talk about good life skills, right? These are good life skills to help us as we go. MDE further outlines 5 competencies in helping to develop students' social and emotional learning, and those include the relationship skills competency, self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and responsible decision-making. And while we address all of those, tonight I'm choosing to focus on numbers 2 and 3, some of the initiatives that we do in our school and throughout our school culture to help students develop that self-awareness and self-management, really because we know that when our students are very well regulated, they are more poised to be successful in the other areas in those competencies and can make better decisions. Something that you will find throughout Red Rock, and many of you may have seen this before, are what we call the breathing ball and the chime. And the chime is a really unique piece to this. Teachers have this in class, oftentimes begin their morning meetings with it. Sometimes we'll have small groups or large groups coming together, and beginning with the chime, it just is, they strike it one time, and students put their thumb to their chest, and they listen to that sound. And they are to continue holding their thumb up for as long as they hear that sound. And I brought a chime, and I thought about doing that, and then I thought, no, I think you get the idea. But when students don't hear that sound anymore, then they put their thumb down, and it's really it's really intended to help students focus, to help students develop that mindful listening, and it's just amazing how quiet a room can become at that time. And we also have the breathing ball. It's also known as a Hoberman sphere, and that expands. And it's a great visual to help students think about their breathing. Now, we go through life every single day breathing. We don't think about that. That's an automatic skill that our bodies possess. But what we're really trying to help our students do when we practice this deep breathing is really, we call it belly breathing. We talk about that with our students, really taking those deep, intentional breaths, because we know that that will trigger the relaxation state for our bodies. When Red Rock was renovated to include a new office space, we took our old office space and created an area that we call Rocky's Den, and that is one space on campus where some of our small group interventions can take place. Now again, remember this is an intervention that really it permeates our entire school culture. You'll find this in classrooms, and I'm going to show you some evidence of that. But in the Rocky's Den, we have a diagram of the brain, and we talk with students about why mindful moving and deep breathing is important for our bodies. What does that do to us physiologically so that we can help regulate ourselves? And we talk about, I'm not very good at it because I haven't gone to enough classes, but we talk about that hand model of the brain, and that we've got everything comes through the spinal cord, and then we teach students about the brainstem and the limbic system and how they work together to manage our emotions, and there's that fight or flight, and then that cortex is kind of that thinking cap that goes over the top of the brain. And we help students understand that if you find yourself feeling dysregulated, and we define that in a lot of different ways, what's happening is you may be caught in that lower limbic system, and so taking time to do some mindful movement or some deep breathing can really help regulate so that you can access that neocortex to make better decisions throughout your day. So this is just one picture. We have some grade levels who, in addition to what they do in their classroom, choose to have time where they come together as a whole grade level. This is our 4th grade, and they come together every Wednesday morning at 8 o'clock and are led by our school social worker in a mindful movement exercise, and they spend time in community focusing on that chime, then taking those deep breaths, and doing some stretches and some very intentional movements to help students focus their thoughts and thinking about their day. We also have some small groups that meet in Rocky's Den. We have, unfortunately, a handful of students who've lost parents recently, and so we have a group that come together, and our social worker works with them. They talk about their feelings and process that, but then helps them think about, ways that they can use their breathing, ways that they can use some of these mindful movements to help them when they're feeling sad or they're starting to feel triggered or dysregulated as well. This particular picture, however, is a group of 5th graders, and they're coming together. They have been chosen by their class to be their mindful movement class leaders. And so this was earlier in the year. They're working with our discretionary teacher, and they are learning some routines and some procedures, and so they can go back to their class and then each day be the leaders of that mindful movement time in their classroom as well. Continuing on with this idea of helping students develop that awareness of when they're feeling dysregulated and then how to better manage those emotions, we have in classrooms what we call calm corners. And a calm corner is just a small space where students can choose to go, and any student can go at any time when they need to go and engage in some sort of mindful movement or deep breathing activity. Now, we have some students who have more significant needs, and so those students perhaps have been taught a very specific routine by our social worker or our intervention teacher that is really tailored to meet that student's particular needs. Our PTO purchased Calm Kits, and you can see that example right there. It's a fun little toolbox, and in there there's some fun timers, some pinwheels, the breathing ball, a variety of things that students might choose to use during their time in the Calm Corner. Time in the Calm Corner is very intentional. Students have some directions here that they follow, and the first thing that they do is they need to take a self-assessment, a brief self-assessment about how they're feeling about their emotions, what they're feeling like, what color they're at, and then they're given a little bubble timer, and that's very fun, and that's a 1-minute timer, and they can flip that up and down 3 times. And they can then choose a calming tool. Sometimes it's a pinwheel that they can practice blowing. It's a Hoberman sphere. Some of them have worry stones. It's a variety of things that the student self-selects that they feel will help them with their stress that they may be feeling at that time. After students use that time, go through that timer 3 times and use their calming tool, they then are asked to put those back. They go back to the colors and
are encouraged to think about what color are they at this time, and then they are asked to rejoin their group. So they're really not stepping away from the learning too terribly long. Again, this is something that we've really been teaching students in all of our classes, grades K through 5. Students now in our upper grades, they've done this for several years, and so I really find that students know how to use this time and really don't take advantage of that time as maybe some were concerned about when we first began this. We do also have something called regulation stations, and then those are just right outside the classroom, and this is a little bit more focused on that sensory input, that heavy work. Our occupational therapist oftentimes will help work closely with our social worker and our intervention teacher. Sometimes students need a little different kind of intervention. They need something where they're doing more wall push-ups or planks or some more large body movements for that sensory input to help them regulate. And so again, we have this right just outside the pod, and students are all welcome to use that. And when we have students who we think would benefit from very specific interventions, again, our OT or social worker will work with them, help them develop a routine. They'll signal to their teacher that they need to step out into a regulation station, complete their routine. Again, there's those directions with that color chart, and then return into class. We will also find posted in some few transition areas a transition routine. Sometimes as teachers are bringing students back in from lunch, recess, maybe specials time, they'll stop by the bathroom. Students have that opportunity to use that restroom, and if they would like to, they can use this routine. Sometimes a teacher will lead it. Sometimes individual students will choose to do that, just again to help them focus their mind as they're returning to the classroom for a different part of their day. And so then to close, as I said, we've got a variety of social emotional initiatives. Those that I focused on tonight were really about helping children develop those regulation skills, because I thought this was a really a neat image when students are feeling a little bit anxious, lots going on in their worlds, lots going on in their minds. It becomes very difficult for them to focus on the important task of learning. So helping students to monitor their feelings, monitor their emotions, recognize when they're feeling triggered and dysregulated, and then having the tools in which they can choose to do that when they need to do that can help clear their minds so they're ready to learn. Are there any questions?
I have a question. So we could do this as adults. It would be very good. So I'm curious because it's just, we've heard so much as we've been going around to schools and talking to teachers just about the growing stress of students generally. Mm-hmm. And as principals, do you talk about, these kinds of strategies that are successful to be done in all the schools, or do you find that just, are you just doing it at Red Rock, or how does that kind of sharing of maybe tools like this go throughout the system?
I know there are a lot of schools throughout our system that use this. I know the breathing ball is frequently found. You've got that at Bailey as well. The degree to which it's implemented at the school, I think, varies. I'm not comfortable speaking to that, but certainly Red Rock is not alone in these initiatives.
Well, great job.
For the public, if they look at this, and I'm thinking, why do kids need this? Are they just naughty kids, or what the issues are? But I think we have to keep in mind that our elementary kids never knew a world without smartphones and 24-hour stimulation through even television with 1,000 channels, and that our brain needs that time to focus differently. And so for those of us that might have grown up a few years ago, the world wasn't like this. And so this calming piece isn't about misbehavior as much as just the overstimulation we're all in. And we know, too, if you keep your phone near you and that text ding goes off, it's really hard not to look at that phone throughout the evening. And so all of these elements really, as Ms. Holt said, helps kids focus on the learning, which can be difficult for them.
Just one cute story. When we went to our PTO to request funding for the Calm Kits, there was some conversation among parents, similar to what you're referencing, Dr. Jacobus. And one of our PTO members spoke up in favor of this and talked about how she sees her students using some of this at home. And actually, recently, to that conversation, her daughter was playing school with her little brothers and sisters and had them practice their breathing before they got into their learning. So, it was cute.
And this is one element to the social emotional learning and the strategies for kids, and it's a wonderful aspect that where it is not an add-on to education. It's really again a foundation to help kids get ready to access the rigors that we want them to access in learning.
So I'm really excited about this. And I've been excited. Several of our schools have come and have talked about the work that they're doing. And I think a little bit to Michelle's point about how do we share best practices, and I think part of it also is how do we know that those things that we're doing in our buildings are working? And so what are we doing around, I mean, I'm thrilled you're using MDE's social emotional learning framework and competencies that have been developed K-12 and are well known to me. I think they're wonderfully written, which is a plug to myself since I wrote them. But I think it's really important to not just think of them as social emotional learning activities or breathing balls or calming corners, but how are those initiatives that we're doing tied to our academic goals and our outcomes and our attendance goals and outcomes and our other the other parts of the student that those help support, and then being really intentional about as we're doing those and as we're using them, and you talked, maybe it's anecdotal, but about how there may have been some resistance to putting a calming corner in because students will just use it as an excuse to get out of something they don't want to do, but then helping them see how to really use it and tracking that sort of even over a school year, how students are able to then recognize when they need it, maybe recognize when their desk partner might need it, being able to support their student, which is going to become their social awareness and their relationship skills. So how are they using their self-management and self-awareness to then help their peers in using those as well, and then demonstrating that I understand when I should use a calming corner, when I shouldn't use it, and that I'm using it to actually do what it's intended. And so I think it's important that we're tracking that, and that we are then, as Michelle suggested, sharing that with our peers, so that as we're looking at whether we're using them or we're implementing them, or we shouldn't just have really great ideas in some of our schools. We should have a mechanism to share those with all of our schools. And I know Mike and Julia now, Christy will help facilitate some of that. But it is certainly something we've heard from our teachers as well in the listening sessions, is wanting to hear how are they using this curriculum, how are they using this practice, how are they integrating this into their day in other buildings. So I think that's really important and to be aware of, and somehow I certainly don't want to put more work on your plate, but documenting that and tracking that and building things in to our assessment schedule that is making sure that we are monitoring that and we're keeping track of it, because we do have it as a priority in the district, and that we're being really intentional about that. And I will also say, to Michelle's point as well, is so social emotional learning is the process which you learn and develop those skills throughout your life. And so it's not like at grade 12 we've mastered them, or at grade 5 we're done with them and we don't have to do them anymore, but we're constantly learning. And so I also want to challenge us as a district to think about how are we supporting our adults, because our employees and our families and our staff also have a need to sort of like refill their tank, and how are we giving them space and creating opportunities for the adults to do that as well. Because certainly it is draining when you're helping 30 elementary students do that all day long, that you have to recognize that you need to be able to do that yourself. So.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I actually learned some things that we can add at Bailey, so thank you very much. I'm glad I'm here tonight. Good evening again, board and cabinet members. I'm very excited to be here. Again, I'm Candy Graham, the principal at Bailey Elementary, and I'm here tonight to talk to you about our theme that we have this year at our school. As a staff, at the end of last year, our climate committee that we have, which comprises all of our staff members, one from each grade level, we chose to focus this school year here on growth mindset. And I usually don't talk after 8 o'clock, so excuse me if I make a few errors. Just kidding. So we chose to have growth mindset be one of our goals for this school year for our students and for our staff. It's based on the book by, I'm a
true elementary teacher here. I brought my show and tell, so I have my items here instead of a PowerPoint. But it's based on the book Mindset by Carol Dweck, which staff members read actually before I arrived at Bailey. This is my 8th year there, and I know that they worked on this book when Molly Roski was the principal at Bailey prior to myself. So this was the book that was originally we used for our growth mindset. At the end of last year then, we used some of our gift money to purchase the Growth Mindset Coach book for all of our teachers that they could have in the spring so they could look at it over the summer. And what this book is a month-by-month handbook for empowering students to achieve. And each month has a mantra, which I'll talk about in just a minute here. And so all of the teachers have a copy of this, and they had it for over the summer to take a look at and start their planning, which worked really well for our students. We also, the first thing we wanted to do was we wanted to create a school-wide t-shirt for our school, not just for staff, but for students as well. In the past, we've had staff spirit wear, we've had student spirit wear, but we haven't had anything as an entire community. And I know at Woodbury Elementary, where Connor Klassen is the principal and Christine was there prior to that, they often have shirts, t-shirts for their staff and for their students. So we had a team of teachers and office staff work on our design for our t-shirts. So this year, all of the staff members and all of the students have a t-shirt that says Grow at Bailey. It was designed by our office support staff, Cecilia Fruworth, and also our art specialist, Heather Marino. So all of the teachers received this right at the beginning of the school year, and then we had all the students who were able to order one. We did ask for a $5 donation from our students, but any student that wasn't able to pay, we still ordered t-shirts for them, and our PTA helped to cover the cost. So the entire building has these t-shirts that we wear on various days throughout the year, which is super fun to see. So we started the school year in September, and the mantra for September was everyone can learn. And so we started the school year off with an all-school assembly in September where the students and the staff all came together, and we kind of kicked off our school year at an opening ceremony where the students and the staff members who were new to Bailey were recognized. All of the new staff members, all of the new students at Bailey wore some colorful leis to identify themselves as new to our community. We introduced all of the new staff members, and then we had all of our new students at Bailey stand up and be recognized, which was really fun, part of our opening ceremony. We also then read the book called The Dot, which is a book about learning, and everybody can learn. And then from there, the teachers took that theme back into their classroom where they continued working on that theme of everyone can learn. From here, we continue to have monthly assemblies with all of our students and staff where we wear our Grow at Bailey t-shirts, and we focus on the monthly mantra. So October, our mantra was My Brain is Like a Muscle, and we had 5th grade students teach the rest of the school a chant to go with the mantra that included some actions. So we continue to do that at each of our monthly assemblies as well. In November, we had the NED show. NED stands for Never Give Up, Encourage Others, and Do Your Best. It's a company that came in with a free presentation for our staff and students. They helped to present our November mantra of I am a valued member of this learning community. And then in December, the mantra was we love a challenge. And I'm very proud of the assembly that was planned by the teachers for this month. One of our 3rd grade teachers, Jen Fries, she received a generous donation from a group named Healing Hearts. And what this group does is they donate money to, for instance, a school, and this happened to be a 3rd grade classroom at our school, that they can use this money then to do some sort of a service learning project and to try to really bring that service learning projects into our schools. So they received a large donation from Healing Hearts, and they decided that they wanted to use our December mantra of We Love a Challenge to help somebody who was in a challenging situation. So Jen Fries, our 3rd grade teacher, decided, and with her students, decided to use the money that was given to them by Healing Hearts to support Paradise Elementary School in North California, who lost their school in the wildfires. She did all of the research on this school, including speaking with people from the school, and she wanted to bring it to our entire Bailey community to help them through a challenge. And we used our growth mindset assembly to help with that. So the students and the staff at Paradise Elementary had just returned to a temporary home as their building was completely destroyed by the wildfires. So Jen used those donations from Healing Hearts, to use to buy a gift card to spend as they wish for this community in California. The students at Bailey Elementary also helped in this way. Each child made a card of hope and encouragement for the students in their same grade level, and they also, as a classroom, made one felt heart per classroom. Jen created a banner that then we put all of the hearts on and we sent to the school along with the donation from Healing Hearts. And the banner had a quote on it from the elementary principal from Paradise Elementary, Debbie Davis, and it said, "What defines us is our character, not our struggles. We will rise up after getting knocked down. That is who we are." And so that was calligraphy on this big banner where then we put the hearts on that as well, and that was just sent over Christmas break to this school in Northern California. So that was a pretty exciting event, and it worked really well with our Grow at Bailey theme. Our monthly assemblies are planned all by teachers, and then we have the students come in and also participate in those monthly assemblies as well. And just to kind of, and we also like to put things all over our school. So I wanted to just bring a couple of the articles that we brought. We have students who talk about a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. So for example, lots of times you hear students say, "I give up," or "I can't do this." So we talk a lot about changing those words into a growth mindset. So instead of saying, "I give up," say, "I'll use a different strategy." Or instead of saying, "I made a mistake," that we learn from our mistakes. And one of the biggest things, and it's coming up in an assembly coming very soon for us, is the power of yet. So we've already taught our students that you may not know something yet. And it's amazing as you go around our school and you listen to our students talking and they may be struggling with something, they stop and they look at their teacher and they say, "Yet." So it's really sticking. I just wanted to end it with a few quotes from some of my staff members and from my students, kind of about how they feel about our work with the growth mindset. Heather Crisco is our media clerk, and she wanted me to share that she has heard so many students in the media center who are learning how to log in or learning how to do research, learning how to code, who are learning the power of the phrase, "I can't do this yet." Adding the simple word of yet seems to be giving the kids a sense of ownership of their learning, and the next time they come into class, they are ready to give it a try again instead of dreading the task ahead. We do a lot of celebrating when the kids who have struggled with a task are now able to accomplish that said task. Michelle Heller, our discretionary teacher, wanted me to share that she thinks our work around the growth mindset is so universal it can be applied and understood from kindergarten up to 5th grade, and I think we all feel that way. The verbiage is student-friendly, and she hears it being used from students and teachers all the time. We try and use real-life situations that students may have experienced and give them tools to use centered around having a growth mindset. Student council members have really been instrumental in giving scenarios on our morning TV news along with our monthly assemblies. Jackie Hoffes, our EL teacher, two of the phrases that she uses a lot with her students and hears is, "Don't be afraid to fail, be afraid not to try," and mistakes mean we're learning. We did have some second graders who also shared a few things about the growth mindset. One of the second graders said she likes how it teaches you not to give up. Keep trying during those hard challenges. The growth mindset helped me be successful with my difficult Continental math test today. I didn't give up and I did really well on the test. Solving challenges is fun with the growth mindset. Growth mindset pushes you harder. You get smarter every time you use a growth mindset, and I would rather have a growth mindset instead of a fixed mindset. So it's really been a positive experience at Bailey, and I have a feeling we'll continue on past this year with this work with the growth mindset. So thank you. Thank you for letting me share. Anybody have any questions?
Does anyone else have questions? Thank you very much for sharing those awesome things that you're doing in your schools. Have a great night.
Now we have the audit, and Dan might invite you guys to stay if you'd like. Yep. Yes. We usually play Rocky music as we get started here.
8.0 information items, we don't have any this evening. 9.0 discussion items, we don't have any this evening. 10.0 are action items. 10.1 is the approval of the application for Washington County Safe Routes to School grant. Our Director of Finance, Dan Pyan. Or are we switching?
I don't think so. I think this is fairly... Dan, you'll do the safe routes first, or are you going to switch? That's the list. That's all right. You can, Aaron, you can stay there. Aaron, you're welcome to stay. Don't, yeah. You might have Julie's agenda she gave you, and she switched it.
Sorry about that. Well, Sharon, I will tell you that, well, welcome, everybody. We have, I will tell you, Sharon, that I did see in the paper that U.S. Bank Stadium was declared I don't know what you call those, a place to go for tornadoes, because the odds of a touchdown there are very, very slim.
Oh, not nice.
Tonight I just want to present you with a resolution for Washington County to apply for some safe routes to schools monies. They would be applying for about a $300,000 grant, and they would need the South Washington County Schools Board of Education support in their application. And I'll just explain just briefly for those that are aware of the road systems in Woodbury. Bailey is a county state aid highway. They are going to make improvements on Bailey from Wood Lane to Radio. About $11 million worth of improvements. They're going to widen the lanes. They're going to put a stoplight in at Benjamin. They're going to take one exit off. And the biggest improvement that in their minds is that they're going to put a roundabout in at Wood Lane and Bailey. How does that affect our safe routes to school? Well, also included in that is walking and biking trails on both sides of Bailey, both the north and south side. As you may or may not know, we do not have any students at Bailey that walk. Because of the circumstances of where the building is, there might be a few on the very south side of there if there's any kids that live down there, but otherwise everybody else buses there because Bailey Avenue or Road is considered a hazardous crossing. So the roundabout will not create a crossing for us, but what will happen is we'll get some trails that will go down both on both the north and south side of Bailey, but the south side is what's more intriguing because we do have development on the south side of Bailey down south of Jerry's and this apartment building. So at some point we'll be able to connect trails to Bailey School and we'll maybe have some walkers someday. So tonight what they're asking for is the board to adopt this resolution that was attached, just supporting the county's request for $300,000 in Safe Route to School monies for part of their $11 million project on Bailey Road.
All right, we'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Pat, second by Katie. I think I heard the S first. Any questions? All right, it sounds like it's a resolution, so we need a roll call. Do we or no? Okay.
Yeah, well, it says how many voted for.
Pat Driscoll?
Yes.
Heather Hirsch?
Yes.
Michelle Whitty?
Yes.
Katie Schwartz?
Yes.
Sharon Van Leer?
Yes.
Ron Kath?
Yes.
Tracy Brunnette?
Yes. Thank you. Motion passes.
Thank you.
10.2, approval of audit results.
Welcome, everybody. Tonight we have Aaron Nielsen here from, he's a principal from MM. I'm not going to say the name because there's some names I can't pronounce on there. It's MMKR, our independent auditors. He will present information relating to the annual audit of the district's financial statements for the fiscal year 2017-18. Once again, they received an unmodified or clean opinion. We did attach full sets of the financial documents, and I also handed out paper documents for the board members. We presented these reports last evening to the board's Audit and Finance Committee. And we will once again apply for the Certificate of Excellence in Financial Reporting given by the Association of School Business Officials International. We have received this award for the last 12 years with last year's award, and we expect to get it again. So once with the presentations done and all the questions are answered, I ask the board for a motion to accept the audited comprehensive annual financial reports and all the other reports.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here this evening. Thank you, Dr. Jacobus, for allowing me to sit in your earlier presentations too. It was very good to hear a lot of the information coincide with the presentation I'll go through. As Dan mentioned, I did get the opportunity to present last night to the Audit and Finance Committee meeting where we spent more time going through the documents. I have a PowerPoint presentation that's out of your management report, so I won't be surprising any of the board members with any new information that I didn't provide you in your packet, but just to use to facilitate that presentation. So I'll move right through it. Share with you our role as independent auditors of Malloy, Montague, Karnowski, Rodasovich. We do go by MMKR, but the independent firm hired by the board to make sure that your financial statements are fairly presented for the district audit as well as the student activity audit. We also have the reports that we're required to report under for internal control and compliance of the financial statement audit, the federal single audit, the state laws and regulations of the Office of the State Auditor's Legal Compliance Manual, as well as then the Manual for Activity Fund Accounting. And you'll see we've able to summarize our audit results pretty briefly here with the district audit. We have issued, as Dan mentioned, the unmodified opinion, or exactly what you're looking for, that your financial statements for the year ended June 30th, 2018 are fairly stated. There is an emphasis of a matter paragraph included in there this year. We had one last year with new accounting standards that were implemented, but we did have the new OPEB accounting standard, GASB, implemented this year, and you'll see that later in our presentation. With regard to our internal control and compliance reports, you'll see that's related to the government auditing standards, the single audit, as well as the legal compliance manual, and I've lumped them all tonight because we're pleased to report we did not have any findings for internal controls or in terms of compliance issues to report to the board this evening.
Hey, Aaron, a quick question. I'm just curious for other school districts, does this set us apart of having this type of with no findings? How often does that really happen with school districts?
I would have to look. I would say we would generally have a finding maybe in one of the areas, so we're really pleased to be able to report that aren't findings. Some of the smaller districts will get a segregation of duty findings that becomes pretty difficult for them to be able to eliminate. So we are pleased to report that you don't have any findings this evening. The student activity audit, so the separate audit for that, separately reported student activity accounts, we had just one comment in the internal control, the completeness of the receipts for the student activity audits. We've given that finding every year, and as I shared last night, we actually have that. I have that finding in all of the student activity audits that we issue. The small amount of receipts they're collecting from a number of areas and the lower materiality really is driving the comment that we have there. Not included in this presentation, but in your management report, we did share with you, we do follow up when we have findings. In the prior year, as we had a couple of findings, and we're pleased to report with our follow-up testing, we did not have to report those findings again this year, and they were cleaned up. My next several slides will focus on the general fund, and as we discussed the growing size of the district, we use the expenditure line to show the change in the size of the operation for South Washington County Schools here. We also show the cash and investment balance alongside that unrestricted operating fund balance. One of the things you see here is a change in those cash balances that was also impacted, as some of you may recall, when the change in the metering of state aid payments to school districts over this 10-year period. We've been back to that 90-10 payment schedule for many years when we look back at just the recent years through 2018. Diving into the general fund financial position a little bit, looking at the fund balance components, that non-spendable, the restricted, committed, assigned, and unassigned categories of fund balance. We discussed a little bit last night. As you can see, the district did experience a slight improvement in that overall fund balance when we compare from 2017 to 2018. It is still below the district's policy of that goal of 5 to 9%. However, as you can see, there was about a $1 million increase from 2017 to 2018, and that compares to a $2 million decrease that was anticipated in the final budget. So actually getting right to the bottom line, you can see that overall increase in fund balance this past year of $1 million. Looking at the students, and I know that was part of the earlier presentation, a key component in the funding that you receive. This past year, we saw your estimated student counts at adjusted ADM, or that average daily membership, at 18,521 students, which represents an increase of about 343 students, or 1.9% over the prior year. When we dive into the revenues a little bit further here, I'll share just a couple of comments because I thought we touched on that earlier this evening, where those sources are coming from. You can see that that focus of the general fund revenue largely coming from state sources, then followed by taxes, and then, as mentioned, the 2% and 2% from federal, and then other local sources. But when we look in total for your general fund this past year, total revenue of the general fund was about $226 million for just the general fund operation. And when we compare that to the final approved budget, coming in very close, within 1% of what was anticipated in that budget, or 0.8%, with a favorable variance just coming in over what was expected. As you can see, there was slight increases in certain areas, primarily in state sources, coming in about, overall for the general fund operation, about 3.3% more than the prior year. And that's capturing that 2% formula allowance that was discussed earlier, as well as serving more students in 2018. When we look at the expenditures, we've got a similar graph where we show budget to actual to prior year, broken down into those object categories, so you can see that concentration of salaries and benefits that we do see with all of our districts and educating students. Within the general fund, making up about 81.6% of the general fund spending for 2018. In total this past year, total expenditures amounted to $227 million approximately, which was just under what was anticipated in the budget, even closer than where we were with revenues just in the past slide. So within 0.5%, so within 0.4%, just under what was approved in the final budget, and then about 1.9% more than the prior year. So not to confuse the matter a little bit, I just talked about revenues at 226 and then expenditures at 227, but I shared with you your fund balance increase. What we're not capturing in the graphs here are other financing sources, so which would include proceeds on capital leases. So we consider those kind of below the line of the revenue and expenditures, which made up then that difference of that overall increase in fund balance. The other operating funds that we focus on here, just the within the governmental funds, the food service operation as well as the community service operation. So I have just one slide looking at the year-end fund balance in comparison to that $227 million in expenditures of the general fund. The food service operation had about $9.5 million in annual spending this past year. The fund balance within that operation ended at about 13.7% of total annual expenditures. You can see that increase did include a one-time transfer from the general fund in 2018. When we look at the community service fund, the annual spending within that operation is about $14.4 million. As you can see, last year we talked about that significant decrease. It did level off, so we didn't see a continued pattern of that decrease, but still with a lean fund balance at 0.2% of their annual expenditures. And looking deeper into the community service fund in total, it's just above a positive position of about $25,000, but there are individual categories that are at a deficit position. So we talked a little last night about that, the importance of these operations to be self-sustaining, because as you know, the resources are lean in the general fund, and that would have to be the area that you'd look to help support that operation. I have just one slide for the internal service funds. The district's been operating 3 individual internal service funds in recent years for the severance obligations, and then the separate local pension for the district, and then until recently the other post-employment benefit obligations, which is winding down with the district making a move to an irrevocable trust fund where $4 million was moved out of this internal service fund, or the OPEB internal service fund, into that irrevocable trust fund. And then my last slide, where we've talked individually in the improved financial position of the individual governmental funds. Now we have to look at them on a consolidated basis, where we're rolling up all the long-term obligations, the long-term assets of the entity, and then combining all of the individual funds, which then captures the other post-employment benefit obligations, which I mentioned. We had a new standard which reduced the net position with that change in accounting principle about $13.5 million this past year, and then also the impact of those statewide pension plans, and then incorporating those into your financial statements. So as we're rolling those obligations into your funds, and some of the requirements to smooth over some of the changes in the funding of those pension plans over a 5-year period, when investment changes occur within the pension plans, they don't all hit you in 1 year. So all of our districts are capturing some of this change with TRA, the Teachers Retirement Association, coming in. So you can see we've tried to isolate the PERA and TRA pension adjustments, which really had one of the more significant impacts when we look at bottom line of $64 million on the top half, and then the OPEB, which then fell right down to that unrestricted category of that entity-wide net position. So with that, I went through a lot of the information pretty quickly. I did kind of want to summarize, wrap up with, as we mentioned, we saw the improvement in the general fund operation, working towards meeting the goal of the 5 to 9% fund balance, still working to do that. We had just one finding, as we mentioned, with the student activity audit, and then we did not have any findings with the annual district audit this past year. So with that, if there's any questions, I know there's a lot of information the board members received in their packets. We'd be happy to try to answer them.
Anyone have questions, comments?
Just an overall comment again, and the reason why I asked the question earlier, I just think that's outstanding results for Dan, Chris, your whole department to have an operation this big. And correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't it 18,000 line items, if my memory serves me right? And to have budgets come in 1%, actuals come in roughly right at 1% of budget. Dan, I can't thank you and your staff enough for the work that you do. And I know Chris behind the scenes is doing a lot too, but there's a lot of people to make this happen. And then it's our whole entire operation that follows the rules too, that makes sure. And I want to echo that loud and clear, because I think our community sometimes, they think, school districts, their money, they're hiding it here, doing that. But if this audit doesn't prove that, first of all, we put a fair budget out there, we're hitting those actuals, and then when we have a third-party company come in and tell us that, I think that's just news that I want bragged from the top of the buildings everywhere. So thank you, Dan.
And thank you. And the audit is a long, tedious process, and we don't see Aaron that much, so we don't hate him too much. But Chris does a lot of work, and someone you maybe have never met, Ryan gets to see her at CFAC. Her name is Chris Blackburn. She does a great job. So send her an email and just say, great job, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I make a motion to accept the audit results.
All right, moved by Ron, second by Pat. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. 10.3 is the approval of our board committees, and I'm pretty sure you all had the opportunity to review. I did get your priorities, so I tried to hit as many of those as I could. So does anyone have any questions, comments about any of that? I know we did have one assignment that we needed to change, so we did do that. All right, otherwise we will entertain a motion to approve the committees.
So moved.
Whoa.
Michelle.
Okay. Okay. I was like, that was right on. All right, so moved by Michelle and second by Sharon. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. 10.4 is the approval of policies, and our Assistant Superintendent Mike Johnson will present that item.
Good evening, Chair Brunnette, board members, Dr. Jacobus, and cabinet members. Select policies tonight in the 500 series for students were chosen for review and editing. We had our first reading 2 weeks ago, or I'm sorry, December 13th. These policies have been reviewed by and updated by select district staff groups. With this group of 8, I'd like to acknowledge the following people who worked on these: activities directors Renee Allen and Tricia Trito in student information, Jim Smokovich, Julie Nielsen, and Chris Blackburn. Board Policy Committee members Sharon Van Leer, Heather Hirsch, and Michelle Whitty reviewed these policies as well earlier in December and made recommendations for board information and the subsequent action. These policies, like I said, were presented for the first reading at the December 13th, 2018 board meeting. What I'd like to do tonight is just to place all 8 before you. If you had any other questions, I know we had some discussion back in December, but here it is for the second reading and approval.
So I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
That was Sharon. And Pat? Okay. Any questions, comments? All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
10.5 is the proposed settlement agreement, and Dr. Jacobus.
Thank you. Tonight I am asking for approval of a proposed settlement agreement between the South Washington County School District and Dr. Keith Bell, who owns the copyright to a book that he authored. Dr. Bell contacted me in 2018 and asserted that a former employee of the district had used social media to post copyrighted material from his book. Dr. Bell threatened to sue the district for copyright infringement. In consultation with the school board's attorney, Mick Waltzberger, I learned that Dr. Bell has taken similar action with respect to a number of other school districts, including other Minnesota school districts. After Dr. Bell threatened legal action, Attorney Waltzberger contacted him to discuss his claim. Those discussions culminated in the negotiation of a proposed settlement agreement, which is subject to your approval. Under the proposed settlement agreement, Dr. Bell would receive a total of $8,500 in exchange for a full settlement and release of any and all potential claims. The district would contribute $3,500 of this amount. Even though the district's insurer questions whether the policy provides coverage for this claim, the insurer has offered to contribute $5,000 as a sound business decision that will allow the district to complete the process quickly and avoid the cost and uncertainty of litigation. Based on a cost-benefit analysis, including the fact that the district will be contributing only $3,500 to the settlement, Attorney Waltzberger and I are recommending that the board approve the proposed settlement agreement. More specifically, I am requesting that the board pass a motion, 1, approving the payment of $3,500 to Dr. Bell from the district and $5,000 from the district's insurer, 2, authorizing Attorney Waltzberger to negotiate with Dr. Bell over language in the agreement, but without increasing the dollar amounts, and 3, authorizing me as the superintendent to sign the final agreement on behalf of the school board.
All right. So we'll entertain a motion to approve.
So move.
Second.
So moved by Pat and second by Sharon. Anyone have questions? All right, then all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. 11.0, reports and comments. 11.1 is the superintendent's report.
I just have a really quick report tonight based on the timing and as we've gone into winter break. There's a lot of things that have happened, but we're moving back into the swing of things as we start this week. One thing I would note is that today is Kelly's birthday, and we're very pleased to celebrate that. She was a benefit, and recipient of some wonderful gifts from all of the cabinet members, and we're pleased to, yes, exactly. Good. And I think is tomorrow your birthday?
Tuesday.
Tuesday is Tracy's birthday. So before we get back together, we'll have another birthday.
Exactly. I'll be eligible for a defensive driver discount. Just saying.
Hey, don't knock that. That's a good deal. You do have to pass the test though first.
I know, and I heard it's hours. It's like, what?
No, it's worth it. Trust me. Do it.
Amen to that. And your AARP card, girl.
Had that for 5 years.
If they allow me to keep my license my next birthday, I'll keep that in mind. So just one quick thing is we were fortunate again to have Minnesota, the department, come in and audit our transportation department. And out of 148 buses, again this year we had 0 concerns raised. Which, if you remember, I think it was 8 years ago where we had the first clean audit of safety features on our buses. That was, we think, one of the first times a district or an organization as large as ours that had that clean bill of health on all of their buses. And so for the last 7 out of 8 years, we've had no findings. We did have 2 findings last year. But our mechanics do such a phenomenal job, as well as filling in for our drivers. As you know, that you've seen it in the papers, and we've talked about it, we have a shortage of drivers in our school district, and there's a shortage of drivers throughout the state. So almost every day, our mechanics are also driving routes, and they're still able to keep up with the safety at such a stellar level. So I want to congratulate our transportation department and our mechanics for such stellar work keeping our buses safe for our kids to come forward. So, and I don't know, Shelley, if you want to just note your phone case. Okay. All right. It matches wonderfully, and I think it's. Yeah. So, and that's it.
All right, thank you. 11.2, our school board member reports. So we'll start with Sharon.
It's all a blur, but I just want to, oh.
It was on.
Okay, now it's on. Okay. Sharon has nothing to say. It's all a blur, except for congratulations, Keith. Grandpa, you can join the ranks with me now.
Yeah.
That's it. I didn't do anything, so hey, go ahead.
Katie. That was kind of holidays. Yes. Exactly. Pat?
No report. Sorry. Pat was with me.
I'm just going to plug the listening session we have ahead of our next board meeting from 5:15 to 6:15. If anyone's still listening, they know Kelly's birthday and Shelley's matching phone case, but hopefully they also will know that they can come next meeting.
Yeah.
That's all I got.
All right. Michelle?
And I just want to thank all the teachers who have been coming to our teacher listening sessions. We've done, I think, 9 or so far, and more to come. So it's really great for teachers and or any staff that want to come to each of the schools. We're visiting each of the schools and trying to learn more what's kind of happening at that local level. So really appreciate learning more of the realities within the schools.
Ron?
A couple committees, but no real report. Again, I wanted to congratulate Dr. Jacobus and Wendy, your family, that becoming a grandfather. That's pretty special. And just want to share my optimism of 2019. I am really excited for 2019. It's going to be an exciting year for this school district. We heard a little bit today on some of that excitement with all of the good things that are happening within our schools, our strong financial situation. And then also, you know, come fall time, it's school board election time too. So there's a lot of important things that'll be before us that really excites me for this future of this district for this year. So I'm really excited for 2019.
Yes, thank you. And I will pass too. I was just sick, so and my ear is still not clear. So if somebody could just bang me on the head, oh, it's driving me crazy. 12.0 future meeting dates, January 17th, like with our listening session, and then February 7th. And if there's nothing else, we can sing happy birthday. 13.0 is adjournment.